When ancient wisdom met modern war. Main story, philosophy in the foxholes. You know what's strange about war? In the midst of the most intense fear and chaos humans can experience, some soldiers found themselves reading ancient philosophy, sitting in foxholes, waiting in trenches, during brief respites between battles. They carried worn paperback books alongside their ammunition. And in those books, written by a Roman emperor and a Greek slave 2,000 years earlier, they found something that helped them survive. Tonight, as you settle into safety and comfort, let me tell you about an unlikely meeting. About what happened when the 20th century's most terrible war collided with the ancient wisdom of Stoicism. About young men, terrified and far from home, discovering that a philosophy developed in marble colonnades actually worked in muddy trenches. This is a story about fear, about courage, about finding ways to stay sane when sanity seems impossible, and about how sometimes the oldest wisdom is exactly what we need when facing the newest horrors. Let's start with a book, a small, portable edition of the Enchiridion, the Handbook of Epictetus. Published in 1943 by a press that specialized in books for soldiers. Cheap paper, simple binding, small enough to fit in a uniform pocket. Not much bigger than a pack of cigarettes. Tens of thousands of these were printed, distributed to American and British soldiers. Part of a program to give troops something to read, something to occupy their minds during the endless waiting that makes up so much of war. Between battles, on ships crossing oceans, in camps waiting for orders. Why Epictetus? Why this particular ancient text? Partly because it's short, practical, divided into brief sections perfect for reading in stolen moments. But also because some military chaplain or education officer, thought that soldiers facing death might benefit from reading a philosopher who'd thought deeply about how to face difficulty with dignity. And here's the remarkable thing, it worked. We have letters, diary entries, memoirs, soldiers writing about how this ancient slave's teachings helped them endure modern warfare. How 2,000-year-old words about accepting what you can't control gave them tools to handle fear, loss, and the constant proximity of death. Picture this. It's June 6th, 1944. D-Day. You're in a landing craft approaching Omaha Beach. Around you, men are praying, vomiting from seasickness and fear. The boat rocks in rough seas. The sound of artillery is getting louder. You can see the beach now, the obstacles, the German fortifications. In your pocket is that small book. You read it last night, trying to calm your nerves. One passage stuck with you. Some things are within our power, and some things are not. Simple, almost too simple, but somehow it helped. The beach is not within your power. The German gunners are not within your power. Whether you'll survive the next hour is not within your power. But your response, your courage, your choice to do your duty despite fear, those are within your power. That's all you control. That's where you focus. The ramp drops. You run. The world becomes chaos and noise and terror. But somewhere in your mind, that distinction holds. What you control, what you don't. It doesn't make you fearless, but it makes the fear manageable. Gives you a framework for action despite fear. This happened, not to everyone, not even to most soldiers, but to enough that it's documented. Enough that we can trace how Stoic philosophy moved from ancient academies to 20th century battlefields. Let me tell you about a man named Admiral James Stockdale. We mentioned him briefly in an earlier conversation, but his story deserves more attention. In 1965, he was shot down over Vietnam and spent 7 years as a prisoner of war. But before that, during World War II, he was a young man studying philosophy. Wait, you might think. Wrong war. And yes, Stockdale's imprisonment was Vietnam, not World War II. But his introduction to Stoicism happened earlier, during his education at Stanford in the 1940s. In the shadow of World War II, the war had just ended. Veterans were flooding into universities on the GI Bill. The horrors were fresh in everyone's minds. Stockdale studied Epictetus in a philosophy class. Just an assignment. Ancient philosophy as part of his education. He was fascinated but didn't yet understand why these ideas resonated so deeply. They were interesting, intellectually compelling, but abstract. Years later, when his plane was hit and he ejected over enemy territory, when he found himself imprisoned and tortured, he remembered, and suddenly those abstract ideas became concrete, practical, essential for survival. He'd say later that Epictetus saved his life, not metaphorically, literally. The Stoic principles: focus on what you control, accept what you don't, maintain your character regardless of circumstances. These gave him a framework for enduring 7 years of hell. But the seeds were planted earlier, in that post-war classroom, by a philosophy professor who'd seen what the war did to young men, who thought maybe ancient wisdom could help future soldiers if they ever faced similar trials. Let's go back further, to World War I, actually, because the connection between Stoicism and modern warfare didn't begin in World War II. It began in the trenches of the Great War, the war that was supposed to end all wars, the war that instead traumatized an entire generation. British officers, particularly, often had classical educations. They'd studied Latin and Greek at school, read ancient philosophy, not because it was practical, but because it was what educated gentlemen did. Classical education as a marker of class and culture. And then they found themselves in trenches, in mud and blood and the screaming chaos of artillery bombardment. Watching men die, sending men to die, living with fear and responsibility and the knowledge that any moment might be your last. Some of them remembered their classical education, pulled out their copies of Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, if they had them, if books survived the conditions, or just remembered passages, repeated them to themselves in the dark. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. These weren't academic exercises anymore. This was emergency philosophy. Philosophy as life support, as a tool for maintaining sanity when everything around you was insane. One British officer, whose diary survived, wrote about reciting Stoic principles during bombardments, not because he believed them fully, not because they eliminated his fear, but because having something to focus on, some mental framework that suggested meaning and control, helped him function, helped him lead his men, helped him survive mentally even when physical survival seemed unlikely. By World War II, this had become somewhat more formalized. Military psychologists, a new field, really, were studying what helped soldiers cope with combat stress. Shell shock from World War I had taught them that psychological preparation mattered, that mental resilience could be developed, that soldiers needed tools for managing fear. And some of these psychologists looked to philosophy, to ancient wisdom about enduring hardship, to Stoicism specifically, with its practical focus on what you can control and its acceptance of what you can't. The military didn't call it Stoicism, usually. They had their own language: mental discipline, emotional control, unit cohesion, focus on the mission. But the underlying ideas, separating what you control from what you don't, accepting fate while maintaining effort, finding meaning in duty, these were Stoic principles under different names. Training incorporated some of this, not explicitly as philosophy, but as practical psychology. You can't control the enemy, can't control the weather, can't control whether a shell has your name on it, but you can control your preparation, your attention to duty, your support of your comrades. Focus there. Let the rest go. Let me tell you about someone whose name you probably don't know: Admiral William Halsey, one of the most aggressive American commanders in the Pacific Theater, known for his fighting spirit, his refusal to back down, his famous quote, "Hit hard, hit fast, hit often." Not exactly philosophical, right? Not the image of a Stoic sage calmly accepting fate. But here's what's interesting. Halsey carried a copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations with him throughout the war. Read it regularly. Quoted from it in letters to his family. Why? Because the aggressive warrior persona was partly performance, necessary for morale, for inspiring his men, for intimidating the enemy. But privately, alone in his cabin, Halsey wrestled with doubt, with fear, with the weight of responsibility for thousands of lives, with decisions that would send men to die. And he found some comfort in Marcus Aurelius, another leader carrying impossible responsibility, writing to himself about how to bear the weight, how to make hard decisions, how to live with the consequences, how to maintain humanity while ordering death. Halsey wasn't soft, wasn't peaceful, but he was human, and he used Stoic philosophy the way Marcus Aurelius had, as a private practice for managing the internal struggle that his public role didn't allow him to show. This pattern repeated throughout the war. Public toughness, private philosophy, the warrior exterior that soldiers needed to see, the questioning, struggling, very human interior that philosophy helped them manage. Now, let's be clear about something. Most soldiers didn't read philosophy. Most had never heard of Epictetus or Marcus Aurelius. Most survived through simpler means: faith in God, love of family, loyalty to comrades, or just grim determination to endure. Philosophy was a minority interest, a tool some found helpful, not a universal solution. But it's worth noting which soldiers tended to find philosophy helpful. Often it was officers, NCOs, people carrying responsibility for others, people who couldn't simply focus on personal survival but had to make decisions, had to maintain composure for others, had to find ways to lead when they were just as scared as anyone else. For these people, Stoic philosophy offered something specific, a framework for bearing responsibility under uncertainty, for making decisions when all options were bad, for maintaining the appearance of confidence when you felt anything but confident. Act as if what you do matters, because it does, but accept that the outcome is not entirely up to you. This is profoundly Stoic, and profoundly useful for leaders in war. You make the best decision you can. You execute it as well as possible. Then you accept whatever follows. You don't torture yourself with what-ifs. You don't freeze because you can't guarantee success. You act, accept, move forward. Let me tell you about the letters. Throughout the war, soldiers wrote home. Millions of letters. Most were carefully censored. You couldn't reveal locations or operations. Couldn't write anything that might compromise security. So soldiers wrote about small things. Food, weather, how much they missed home. But sometimes, in letters to family or close friends, they wrote about what was really happening in their heads, how they were coping, what was keeping them sane. And in some of these letters, philosophy appears. A soldier writing to his father, a professor. I remember that book you gave me before I shipped out. The Meditations. I read it sometimes when things are quiet. It helps, especially the parts about accepting what comes, about doing your duty regardless of outcome. I'm not sure I really understand it all, but it gives me something to hold on to. An officer writing to his wife, you asked how I manage the fear, how I lead men when I'm just as scared as they are. Honestly, I keep thinking about that Stoic principle. Some things are up to us, some things are not. I can't control whether we survive, but I can control whether we do our jobs well, whether we support each other. That's enough to focus on. It has to be. These letters survived. They're in archives. They show something important. Philosophy wasn't just abstract theory for these men. It was practical, concrete, a tool they used daily, like their rifles and their helmets. Their philosophical training was part of their equipment. Let's talk about fear, because that's what this is really about. Stoicism isn't about eliminating fear. Anyone who tells you that is either lying or hasn't been truly afraid. Fear is biological, hardwired. When you're under fire, when bombs are falling, when your friends are dying around you, you're afraid. Everyone is afraid. The question is, can you function despite fear? Can you think, make decisions, move, fight? Or does fear paralyze you, make you freeze, make you break? Stoic philosophy offers a specific technique for managing fear: cognitive distancing. You observe your fear without being consumed by it. You acknowledge it. Yes, I'm terrified, but you don't let it control your actions. You create a small space between stimulus and response, between I'm afraid and therefore I must flee or freeze. Modern psychology has confirmed this works. Cognitive behavioral therapy uses similar techniques. Mindfulness meditation teaches the same skill. But Epictetus figured it out 2,000 years ago. Your first thought is automatic, but your second thought, your response to the first thought, that's where you have choice. So you're in a foxhole. Artillery is landing nearby. Your fear says, run, hide, curl up and wait for it to stop. But your training, your philosophy, your discipline says, stay. Do your job. Support your squad. The fear doesn't go away, but you act anyway. You create that tiny space between feeling and action. And in that space, you maintain your humanity, your effectiveness, your role. Let me tell you about someone else, Viktor Frankl. We mentioned him before in the context of Stoicism's legacy, but his story belongs here too. He was a psychiatrist in Vienna when the Nazis invaded. He was Jewish. He was sent to concentration camps, Auschwitz, Dachau, places of unimaginable horror. And in those camps, Frankl observed something fascinating and terrible. Some people survived and some didn't, and it wasn't always the physically strongest who lived. Sometimes it was people who maintained some sense of meaning. some reason to endure, some future they were living for. After the war, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and in it, he describes lessons that are profoundly Stoic, even if he doesn't always use that language. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. This is Epictetus. This is Marcus Aurelius. This is the core Stoic insight. External circumstances don't determine your internal state. They influence it, yes, make it harder or easier to maintain equanimity. But the final choice is always yours. Even in a death camp, even in a war zone, that irreducible core of freedom remains. Frankel's experience wasn't in World War II combat, exactly, but it was certainly part of World War II horror, and his insights applied directly to soldiers' experiences, to anyone facing circumstances that seem to strip away humanity. The Stoic response is to find that core that can't be stripped away, that last freedom, that choice of attitude. Let's talk about something important, the limits of Stoicism, because it wasn't a magic solution. It didn't prevent trauma, didn't eliminate suffering, couldn't protect you from bullets or make the horror of war acceptable. Some soldiers who studied Stoic philosophy still broke, still developed what we now call PTSD, still came home changed, damaged, unable to fully reintegrate into civilian life. The philosophy helped, but it wasn't armor. It didn't make them invulnerable, and some soldiers found it cold, insufficient. They needed more emotion, not less. Needed to rage at the injustice. Needed to grieve without philosophical distance. Needed to feel fully, even if feeling fully meant pain. There's a danger in Stoicism pushed too far. Emotional suppression masquerading as emotional control. Detachment becoming disconnection. Acceptance becoming resignation. Some soldiers confused endure without complaining with don't feel. And that's not what Stoicism teaches, but it's an easy mistake to make. The best use of Stoic philosophy in war was as a tool, not a religion. Something to use when it helped. Something to set aside when it didn't. A technique for managing specific challenges, fear, responsibility, grief over things you can't control. Not a comprehensive solution to all problems. Let me tell you about the Pacific Theater specifically, because the conditions there created particular psychological challenges. Island warfare, brutal heat, disease, malaria, dysentery, jungle rot. Long periods of boredom punctuated by intense combat. An enemy who often fought to the death rather than surrendering. And isolation. On some islands, you felt completely cut off from the world, from civilization, from anything familiar. Just jungle and ocean and the daily struggle to survive. Some soldiers went months without letters from home, without news, without any reminder that the world they'd left still existed. In these conditions, philosophical reading became vital for some soldiers. Not just Stoicism, any reading that connected them to civilized life, to thought, to humanity, poetry, novels, philosophy, anything that reminded them they were more than animals fighting for survival. The Stoic texts worked particularly well because they were written by men who'd experienced hardship. Marcus Aurelius on military campaigns, Epictetus as a slave. These weren't armchair philosophers. They'd known discomfort, fear, loss. Their wisdom came from experience, and that gave it weight. A marine writing in his diary on Guadalcanal. Read some Epictetus today during the wait. He talks about enduring what you must endure, about not wishing things were different, about accepting your post and doing your duty. It helps. Makes this place seem less like meaningless suffering and more like, I don't know, a test, a post I've been assigned, something I can endure with dignity rather than just suffering through. Let's talk about the European theater. Different challenges. Urban warfare. The knowledge that you were fighting on the soil of civilizations thousands of years old. Ancient cities being destroyed. The weight of history everywhere. Some soldiers felt this acutely. Felt the tragedy of modern war consuming ancient culture. Felt the irony of reading Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, while fighting through Italy, while seeing Rome itself, or what was left of it after bombing. One officer wrote about visiting the ruins of the Roman Forum during a break in the fighting, standing where Marcus Aurelius himself might have stood, thinking about how that ancient emperor had commanded legions, made life and death decisions, bore responsibility for an empire, and how his private journal, never meant for publication, survived 2,000 years to help a modern soldier in a different kind of war. The continuity was comforting somehow. The knowledge that leadership's burdens hadn't changed, that men had always struggled with fear and responsibility and the gap between what they wished to be and what they could manage to be. That Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, had also been human, had also struggled, had also needed to remind himself daily of principles he kept forgetting. If he needed reminders, if he needed daily practice, then it was okay that modern soldiers did too. The struggle wasn't a sign of failure. It was just the human condition. Then and now, let me tell you about group reading. Because soldiers didn't only read philosophy alone. Sometimes, in camps or during quiet periods, small groups would gather, read passages aloud, discuss them, argue about them. This served multiple purposes. It was entertainment, something to do during the endless waiting. It was bonding, creating connections between men who might die tomorrow. And it was education. Many soldiers hadn't finished high school, let alone studied philosophy. These informal sessions gave them access to ideas they'd never encountered. An officer might read a passage from Epictetus. Open it up for discussion. What does this mean? How does it apply to what we're facing? Do we agree with it? Does it help? The discussions weren't academic. They were practical, survival-focused. He says we should accept what's not in our control, but we're supposed to fight to try to change outcomes. How do those fit together? And they'd work it out. Realize that Stoic acceptance doesn't mean passivity. Means not torturing yourself over things you genuinely can't change while fully engaging with things you can influence. These sessions created a space for vulnerability, for admitting fear and doubt, for acknowledging that everyone struggled. In the military, especially then, showing weakness was dangerous. Admitting fear could get you labeled as a coward. But philosophical discussion allowed emotion and struggle to be approached intellectually, made it safer to examine feelings by examining ideas. Let's talk about coming home. Because the war ended, soldiers survived, some of them, and came back. And they brought Stoic philosophy with them, applied it to civilian life, to the challenge of readjusting, of dealing with trauma, of finding meaning after experiencing the ultimate extremity. Some veterans became teachers, shared what they'd learned, not just military skills, but life skills. how to endure difficulty, how to maintain composure under pressure, how to accept what you can't change while changing what you can. Others kept it private, a personal practice, a way of managing the memories, the nightmares, the survivor's guilt. When the images came, and they always came, Stoic techniques helped create distance, not to eliminate the pain, but to make it bearable, to keep it from consuming them. Some veterans pursued formal philosophy education, used the GI Bill to study the authors who'd helped them survive, became professors themselves, taught Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius to new generations, though they rarely talked about why these texts mattered to them personally. The war was private, but the wisdom could be shared. Here's something important. Stoicism didn't win the war. Bombs and bullets and industrial production and military strategy won the war. Philosophy was auxiliary, supplementary, a tool for helping individuals cope, not a weapon against fascism. But it mattered anyway, because wars are won by individuals, by soldiers who keep fighting despite fear, by leaders who make decisions despite doubt, by humans who maintain their humanity despite being placed in dehumanizing circumstances. And for some of those individuals, Stoic philosophy made the difference between functioning and breaking, between maintaining integrity and losing themselves, between surviving mentally as well as physically. Not for everyone, not even for most, but for enough that it's worth remembering, worth honoring, worth passing on. The ancient wisdom that Marcus Aurelius wrote in his tent during the Marcomannic Wars, that Epictetus taught to his students in Nicopolis, that traveled through centuries, surviving the fall of Rome, the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, that reached the 20th century just in time to help young men face modern warfare with ancient dignity. Let me tell you one more story. A soldier, his name doesn't matter. He's representative of thousands, sitting in a foxhole in France in 1944. It's cold. It's raining. He's exhausted. He's terrified. The man next to him died yesterday. Tomorrow they attack again. He pulls out that small book, the Enchiridion, pages damp and worn from being carried for months. He can barely see to read in the dim light, but he knows some passages by heart now, of things some are in our power and others are not. In our power are opinion, movement toward a thing, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own acts. Not in our power are the body, property, reputation, offices, and in a word, whatever are not our own acts. He thinks about this. The cold isn't in his power. The fear isn't fully in his power. Whether he survives tomorrow isn't in his power. The deaths he's witnessed aren't in his power. But his courage, his choice to do his duty despite fear, his decision to support his comrades, his determination to maintain his humanity despite horror, those are in his power. Only those. But those are enough. He closes the book, puts it back in his pocket. The fear doesn't go away. The cold doesn't get warmer. Tomorrow will still be terrible. But he has a framework, a way of thinking about it that makes it bearable, that reminds him he has choices even when choice seems absent. A Greek slave taught him this. A Roman emperor confirmed it. And now, 2,000 years later, in a muddy hole in France, it helps him face tomorrow. This is what World War II soldiers learned about Stoicism, that ancient wisdom can address modern problems, that the fundamental challenges of being human don't change much even when circumstances do. That fear in duty and mortality and meaning. These were questions 2,000 years ago, and they're questions today. They learned that philosophy isn't just for libraries and lecture halls. It's for foxholes and battlefields, for the worst moments of life, not just the contemplative ones. That's when you need it most. They learned that you don't have to believe everything a philosophy teaches to benefit from its practices, that you can use tools without accepting the entire worldview. That practical wisdom is valuable regardless of theoretical completeness. They learned that philosophy is practice, not theory. That reading isn't enough. You have to apply, test, refine, make it your own. Marcus Aurelius wasn't writing for publication. He was writing to himself, working it out, practicing. That's what makes the meditations useful. It's honest struggle, not polished teaching. And they learned that courage isn't absence of fear. It's action despite fear. That dignity isn't given by circumstances, but maintained despite them. That you can't control what happens to you, but you can control who you are in the face of what happens. These lessons didn't make the war less terrible, didn't justify it, didn't make death and destruction acceptable, but they helped some soldiers survive it, mentally, spiritually, humanly, and they passed those lessons forward to later generations, to peacetime applications, to anyone facing difficulty. The wisdom traveled from ancient Rome to World War II to now. To you, tonight, rest knowing that humans have faced terrible things and found ways to maintain their humanity. That ancient wisdom still works. That you have tools for whatever you face. The soldiers would want you to know this. They'd want their struggles to mean something. Their use of philosophy to help someone else someday. Sleep now. Tomorrow you face your own challenges. But you're not alone. You're part of this long tradition, this human story, this ongoing conversation about how to live with courage and dignity. The philosopher soldiers rest tonight. Their battles are over. Their wisdom remains. The philosophy they carried, details and unknown facts, the secret soldiers kept in their pockets. Now, you know the basic story. Soldiers reading Stoic philosophy, ancient wisdom meeting modern warfare. But let me tell you about the details that don't usually make it into the official histories. The strange practices, the unexpected ways philosophy was actually used, the secrets that soldiers carried in their pockets along with those worn books. Tonight, as you drift deeper into rest, let me show you what really happened when young men tried to apply 2,000-year-old wisdom to circumstances its authors never imagined. The improvisations, the failures, the surprising discoveries. Because the reality was stranger and more human than the inspiring stories suggest. Let's start with something odd. Soldiers used Stoic texts as coded messages. Not officially, not as part of any military program, but informally, creatively, in ways their commanders never intended. Picture this: you're writing a letter home. The censors read everything. You can't tell your family where you are, can't describe what you've seen, can't express your real fears because that might hurt morale, theirs and yours. But you can quote philosophy. The censors don't flag that. It's educational, uplifting even. So you write, I've been thinking about what Epictetus said about some things being in our power and others not. It helps me understand my situation. Your family knows Epictetus. You gave them a copy before you shipped out. They can look up that passage. And they understand. You're saying you can't control what's happening, that you're in danger, that you're trying to manage fear. You've communicated something real without saying anything the censors would cut, or you quote a specific passage number. Been meditating on Meditations Book 6, Section 8 lately. Your wife or your father, whoever has your copy, can look it up, can find what you're really saying hidden in Marcus Aurelius's 2,000-year-old words. This happened. We have the letters. We have the copies of books with certain passages marked. Families kept them. Soldiers used ancient philosophy as a code for expressing things modern military censorship wouldn't allow. It's brilliant, really, and completely unintended. The military distributed these books for morale, for mental discipline. They never imagined soldiers would use them for covert communication. But soldiers have always been creative about circumventing rules they found too restrictive. Let me tell you about the marginal notes. Because those books that soldiers carried, the ones that survived, they're in archives and museums now. And if you look at them closely, you find handwriting, annotations, thoughts written in the margins. Some are what you'd expect, underlining important passages, marking sections that resonated. This, or remember this, or yes, scrawled next to particularly relevant paragraphs. But others are more revealing. Arguments with the text. But how? Next to a passage about accepting fate. Easier said than done, beside advice about controlling emotion. Not always possible, near instructions about maintaining composure. These soldiers weren't passive readers. They were wrestling with the texts, testing the philosophy against reality, finding it sometimes helpful, sometimes insufficient, being honest about when ancient wisdom worked and when it didn't. One book, a copy of the Enchiridion now in the Imperial War Museum, has a particularly moving notation. Next to Epictetus's instruction to remember that those we love are mortal, that we might lose them at any time, someone wrote, "Lost Tom today. Knew this might happen. Doesn't make it easier, but at least I'm not surprised. At least I can function." E was right about that much. Tom was probably a squad mate, a friend, and this soldier, reading his philosophy in the aftermath of loss, found that it didn't eliminate the pain, but it did provide a framework for continuing, for not being destroyed by grief, for functioning despite loss. That's not the inspiring story we usually tell. It's messier, more honest, more human. The philosophy helped, but it didn't make everything okay. It just made things bearable. Let me tell you about something called the Stoics Kit. This was informal, unofficial, but it spread through certain units through word of mouth. A collection of practices that soldiers developed for applying Stoic philosophy under combat conditions. First item, a pocket notebook. Small, waterproof if possible. You write in it daily, not a regular diary. That's too dangerous if captured, but philosophical notes, observations, reminders to yourself. Today, practiced premeditatio malorum before the patrol. Imagined everything that could go wrong. Somehow made it less scary when things actually did go wrong. No, this actually works. Or, tried the negative visualization. Imagine losing everything. It's supposed to make you grateful for what you have. Instead, made me sad. Maybe not the right technique for this situation. Or simply, focus on what I control, my effort, not the outcome. Can't control if we win. Can control whether I try my hardest. These notebooks became philosophical laboratories, places to test ancient wisdom against modern reality, to note what worked and what didn't, to develop personal versions of Stoic practice tailored to combat conditions. Second item in the Stoics kit, a coin. Specifically, a challenge coin. Those military coins that units give members. But you designated it as your Stoic coin. You'd flip it or hold it when making decisions. Not for luck, not superstitiously, but as a physical reminder. The coin represented the Stoic dichotomy of control. One side, what you control, your choices, your effort, your virtue. The other side, what you don't control, outcomes, others' actions, fate. Before a mission, you'd hold the coin. Feel both sides. Remind yourself, I control my part. I don't control the rest. Do my part well. Accept whatever follows. It sounds simple, maybe even silly, but having a physical object helped. Philosophy can be abstract. A coin in your hand is concrete. It anchored the practice, made it real, gave you something tangible to focus on when fear was overwhelming thought. Some soldiers still have these coins. 75 years later, they keep them. They'll tell you, it's just a coin, just metal, but it meant something, still means something. A reminder of a time when abstract philosophy became concrete necessity. Third item, a phrase card. This was the most common element. A small card, sometimes official military issue, sometimes improvised from whatever paper was available, with one or two key Stoic phrases written on it. The phrases varied. Different soldiers found different passages helpful, but some were common. Some things are up to us. Some things are not. The obstacle is the way. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. These cards went in pockets, in helmets, inside uniform jackets. You'd pull them out during quiet moments. Read them, repeat them, let them become mantras, let them shape thought patterns. Modern psychology calls this cognitive restructuring or positive self-talk. The soldiers just called it remembering what matters. But they discovered, through trial and error, that having these phrases immediately accessible, not having to remember them from a book you might not have with you, made them more useful. When you're pinned down, when artillery is landing nearby, you can't pull out a book and find the right passage. But you can touch your pocket, feel the card, repeat the phrase to yourself. Let it interrupt panic. Let it give you something to focus on besides fear. Let me tell you about the chaplains. Because the military had chaplains, religious leaders assigned to units, and their relationship with Stoic philosophy was complicated, interesting, sometimes contradictory. Officially, many chaplains promoted Stoicism. They saw it as compatible with religious faith, the idea of accepting God's will. That Stoic acceptance of fate, just with theological framing. The emphasis on virtue, that matched religious teaching about righteousness. The focus on what you can control, that was practical wisdom any chaplain could endorse. So chaplains held discussion groups, led readings, helped soldiers interpret ancient texts in ways that connected with their faith traditions. A Protestant chaplain might say, when Epictetus talks about the logos, the rational principle ordering the universe, that's not so different from providence, from God's plan. We're accepting divine will, just using different language. A Catholic chaplain might emphasize the Stoic virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, temperance, and note how they aligned with cardinal virtues in Catholic theology. The pagans got close to truth through reason. We complete that truth through revelation. But the practical advice? Still solid. Jewish chaplains found connections to Talmudic wisdom, the acceptance of what must be accepted, the focus on right action regardless of outcome, the sense that meaning comes from how you respond to circumstances, not from the circumstances themselves. But privately, some chaplains worried. They worried that Stoicism's emphasis on self-reliance might undermine faith in divine help, that its focus on emotional control might suppress needed grief and fear that should be brought to God, that its acceptance of fate might discourage prayer for divine intervention. One chaplain's journal, preserved in the National Archives, reveals this tension beautifully. He writes, "The Stoic texts help the men. I see it. They're calmer, more functional, better able to do their duties. But I worry they're replacing faith with philosophy, that they're learning to rely on themselves rather than on God." But then, in the next entry, watch Private Johnson read his Epictetus before a patrol today. Then watched him pray. He does both. Maybe they're not incompatible. Maybe the philosophy helps him maintain the composure to pray effectively. Maybe I'm worrying about nothing. This chaplain eventually made peace with it, decided that anything helping soldiers survive with dignity was good, that God could work through ancient philosophy just as through modern prayer, that Stoicism and faith could coexist, each supporting the other. Other chaplains never fully reconciled this, remained uncomfortable with the prominence of pagan philosophy among Christian soldiers. But they tolerated it, because it worked, because the alternative, soldiers breaking psychologically, was worse. Pragmatism won over theological purity. Let me tell you about the failures, because we've talked about when Stoicism helped, but it didn't always help. Sometimes it made things worse. And these stories matter too. Some soldiers took Stoic teaching about emotional control too far, became emotionally numb, disconnected. They'd suppress everything: fear, grief, joy, connection. They'd interpret maintain equanimity as feel nothing. And this wasn't health. This was dissociation. This was trauma response masquerading as philosophy. One psychiatric report from a military hospital in England, 1944, describes a soldier who'd studied Stoicism intensively, who could quote Epictetus extensively, who maintained perfect composure even when describing horrific experiences, who seemed, on surface, to be functioning perfectly. But he wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating properly, had lost all emotional connection to other people. The psychiatrist noted, patient has weaponized Stoic philosophy against his own emotions, has interpreted acceptance as suppression, has confused equanimity with emotional death. This is not health. This is profound disassociation dressed in philosophical language. Treatment involved, ironically, helping him feel again, helping him understand that Stoicism wasn't about eliminating emotion, but about responding to emotion appropriately. That Marcus Aurelius grieved when his children died, that Epictetus acknowledged pain. That acceptance wasn't the same as numbness. There were soldiers who used Stoicism to justify fatalism, who interpreted accept what you can't control as don't try to change anything, who became passive, resigned, who'd given up without admitting they'd given up. Whatever happens, happens. Nothing I can do about it. Why trot? This isn't Stoicism. This is depression. This is learned helplessness. But it could hide behind Stoic language, could pretend to be philosophical wisdom when it was actually surrender. Good officers learned to spot this. Learn the difference between Stoic acceptance, which was active, which involved full effort combined with outcome detachment, and fatalistic resignation, which was passive, which involved no effort because it won't matter anyway. They'd have conversations. Stoicism doesn't mean don't try. It means try your hardest, then accept the result. You control the effort. You don't control the outcome. So give everything to the effort. That's what Epictetus would say. That's what's in your power. Sometimes this helped. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes the fatalism was too deep. Was actual depression that needed medical treatment, not philosophical correction. But officers tried. Used philosophy to counter what they saw as philosophical misuse. Let me tell you about the women. Because WACs, Women's Army Corps, and nurses and other women in uniform also encountered Stoic philosophy. But their experience was different and largely undocumented. Women weren't supposed to need this kind of mental training. The official assumption was that women weren't in combat, so they wouldn't face the same psychological stress. This was, of course, nonsense. Nurses saw horror that matched combat. WACs faced danger. Women were bombed, attacked, killed. They needed coping mechanisms just as much as men. But the philosophical texts weren't distributed to women's units the same way. The programs focused on male soldiers. The assumption was, unconsciously, probably, that philosophy was masculine, that women would cope through other means. Faith, emotional support from each other, maternal resilience. Some women found Stoic texts anyway, borrowed them from male soldiers, bought their own copies, read them and found them helpful. But they had to seek them out. They weren't handed them as part of training. And when women talked about using Stoic philosophy, they often weren't taken seriously. One nurse's memoir describes discussing Epictetus with a doctor. His response, "That's nice. But you women are naturally more accepting anyway. You don't need philosophy for that." She wanted to scream at him. Wanted to explain that no, she wasn't naturally accepting. She was terrified, traumatized, and the philosophy helped. But she couldn't say this without seeming weak, without undermining her professional status. So she smiled, nodded, kept reading Epictetus privately. Let me tell you about translation issues. Because here's something interesting. The Stoic texts soldiers read weren't always accurate translations. Sometimes they were simplified, paraphrased, adapted for military readership. The military wanted texts that were accessible, that didn't require classical education to understand. So they commissioned new translations. Clearer language, shorter sentences, technical philosophical terminology replaced with plainer words. Sometimes this helped, made the texts more readable, more immediately applicable, but sometimes it changed the meaning. Subtleties were lost, qualifications were removed, complex ideas were oversimplified. For example, Epictetus's concept of apatheia, which doesn't mean lack of feeling but rather freedom from irrational passion, was often translated simply as calm or composure, which is close, but not quite right. The distinction matters. Apatheia allows for appropriate emotion. Calm suggests suppression of all emotion. Soldiers reading simplified versions sometimes got incomplete Stoicism, got the parts about control and acceptance, but missed the parts about appropriate emotion and social duty, got techniques without full context. Some scholars later criticized these military editions, called them distortions, said they did a disservice to Stoic philosophy. But the counterargument was, better imperfect philosophy that helps soldiers survive than perfect philosophy that's inaccessible. Better simplified wisdom than no wisdom. And soldiers weren't stupid. Many noticed the gaps, sought out fuller translations, read scholarly works, continued their philosophical education after the war precisely because the simplified versions left them wanting more depth. Let me tell you about the rivalries. Because soldiers being soldiers, they sometimes got competitive about philosophy, created informal hierarchies, tested each other. Some units developed cultures where knowing Stoic philosophy became a mark of status. If you could quote Marcus Aurelius accurately, if you knew your Epictetus, if you could discuss the finer points of Stoic ethics, this earned respect. This made you part of an in-group, which sounds positive, maybe, but it also created pressure, exclusion. Soldiers who didn't care about philosophy, who coped other ways, could feel inadequate, could feel they were failing some standard they hadn't asked to be judged by. And there was gatekeeping. You're not reading it right. You don't really understand what Epictetus meant. That's not how a real Stoic would interpret that passage. Soldiers arguing about philosophical interpretation while waiting to go into combat. It would be funny if it weren't also kind of sad. One letter from a soldier to his philosophy professor back home. Some of the guys here are insufferable about Stoicism. They've made it into a competition. Who can be calmer? Who can care less about danger? Who can quote more passages from memory? I wanted to tell them, this isn't the point. The point is to help each other survive. But they wouldn't listen. They're too busy proving they're better Stoics than everyone else. The professor's response, archived with the letter, that's not new. The ancient Stoics had the same problem. Competitive virtue signaling. Philosophical one-upmanship. Humans are humans, regardless of what philosophy they study. Use what helps you. Ignore the rest. Let me tell you about the black market. Because of course there was a black market. There's always a black market in armies. And Stoic texts became valuable enough to trade. The official distributions were limited. Not every soldier got a copy. So an informal economy developed. You could trade your cigarette ration for a worn copy of the Meditations. Or trade a copy of Epictetus for extra socks. Or trade chocolate for someone to hand copy passages for you if you couldn't get an actual book. Particularly well-marked copies. Books with useful marginal notes from soldiers who'd found certain passages especially helpful. These became valuable. You could trade up, get a better, more useful edition by offering something of material value. Chaplains sometimes acquired extra copies through religious channels, could get books donated by churches back home. They distribute these, but not always equitably. Sometimes favorites got books. Sometimes you had to prove your seriousness about philosophy. Sometimes it was just random. And when soldiers died, their books were valuable. Should have been sent home with personal effects. Sometimes were. But sometimes comrades kept them, not out of malice, out of need. He doesn't need it anymore. I do. He'd understand. Was this theft or practical redistribution? The line was blurry. One soldier wrote about this. Found Thompson's copy of Epictetus after he was killed. Kept it. Feel guilty, but also not guilty. He marked passages that helped him. Those passages might help me. He'd want them to help someone. I hope he'd want it to be me. Let me tell you about the specific practices soldiers developed. Because it wasn't just reading. They created exercises, rituals, ways of applying philosophy actively. Morning Stoicism. Before missions, small groups would gather. One person would read a passage. Everyone would sit with it silently for a minute. Then they'd briefly discuss application. Today, this means it took 5 minutes, created focus, set intention, reminded everyone what they were trying to embody. Evening review. Based on the Stoic practice of reviewing your day, soldiers adapted this for combat conditions. Not detailed examination, too exhausting, but brief check-in. Today, what did I control well? What did I fail to control? What will I do differently tomorrow? Some did this alone, some with a buddy. Some wrote in those waterproof notebooks. The breath practice, not traditional Stoicism, exactly. But soldiers combined Stoic philosophy with practical breath control. When fear spiked, you'd breathe slowly while repeating a Stoic phrase. This is not in my control. My breath is in my control. The combination, physical practice plus philosophical frame, was more effective than either alone. The death meditation, this one was controversial. Based on Stoic exercises about memento mori, remembering death, soldiers would deliberately imagine their own deaths. Not morbidly, but realistically. I might die today. How do I want to face that? What do I want my last thoughts to be? This was supposed to create clarity, focus, appreciation for being alive. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it just increased anxiety. Let me tell you about the long-term effects. Because the war ended, soldiers came home, and the philosophy came with them. Some veterans continued formal Stoic practice, daily reading, regular review, philosophy as permanent habit. These men often became teachers, not all professionally, some just in their communities, known as wise, as people you could talk to when facing difficulty. Their war experience plus their philosophical practice made them valuable counselors. Others dropped the formal practice but kept the frameworks, didn't read the texts anymore, but still thought in Stoic categories, still separated what they could control from what they couldn't, still focused on virtue over outcome. The philosophy had become part of how they thought, internalized, automatic. Some rejected it entirely, associated Stoicism with trauma, with the worst period of their lives. They'd used philosophy to survive, but they didn't want to remember surviving, wanted to move on, build new lives, new ways of coping. They gave away their books, never talked about it, and that was okay too. Philosophy served its purpose, helped them survive. Now they needed different tools, and some had complicated relationships with it, would return to Stoic texts during difficult periods. Crisis, loss, challenge. The philosophy was emergency equipment, stored away most of the time, brought out when needed. This was maybe the most common pattern. Stoicism as toolbox, not as identity. Let me tell you about the conversations that happened decades later. Because World War II veterans, growing old, sometimes talked about their philosophical practices, explained to younger generations what had helped them. These conversations often happened quietly. A grandfather talking to a grandson, an elderly veteran meeting a young soldier heading to Vietnam or Iraq. Person to person, private transmission of wisdom. Let me show you something that helped me. And they'd pull out those worn books, those coins, those phrase cards they'd kept for 50 years. Not as relics, as tools that might still be useful. I can't tell you it will stop the fear, Nothing stops the fear, but this. And they'd explain the dichotomy of control, the focus on effort over outcome, the acceptance of what must be accepted, the maintenance of character regardless of circumstances. Some young soldiers listened, found it helpful, continued the tradition, applied ancient philosophy to new wars. Others didn't connect with it, needed different approaches, and the veterans understood, weren't offended. It helped me. If it helps you, good. If not, find what does. That's what matters. Let me tell you about the unintended consequences. Because distributing Stoic philosophy to soldiers changed things in ways the military didn't anticipate. Some soldiers became conscientious objectors after studying philosophy, decided that war was incompatible with Stoic virtue, that they couldn't, in good conscience, continue killing. This was rare, but it happened. Philosophy meant to improve soldiers' effectiveness made some soldiers question the whole enterprise. The military wasn't happy about this, hadn't intended to create philosophical pacifists. But what could they do? Courts-martial for taking philosophy too seriously? They usually transferred these soldiers to non-combat roles. Medical corps, administration, quietly dealt with the problem. Other soldiers became more critical of authority. Stoicism emphasizes reason, individual judgment, virtue over obedience. Some soldiers started questioning orders. Not refusing, that would be mutiny, but asking why. When told to do something unnecessarily cruel or pointless, they'd push back. Cite Stoic virtue. Insist on acting justly even in war. Good officers appreciated this. Wanted thinking soldiers, not automatons. But some officers found it threatening. Wanted obedience, not philosophical debate. Tension developed, never quite resolved. The military wanted soldiers with mental discipline. Didn't fully anticipate that mental discipline might include thinking independently about ethics. Let me tell you about the lost texts. Because not all the books survived. Not all the letters made it home. Not all the stories were told. How many soldiers read Stoic philosophy and found it helpful but never wrote about it? How many conversations happened that weren't documented? How many personal practices developed that we'll never know about? Thousands of soldiers died carrying those books. The books were lost with them, or sent home, but families didn't understand their significance, threw them away or donated them or lost them in moves. How much wisdom, hard-won insights about applying ancient philosophy to modern extremity disappeared? Some soldiers destroyed their philosophical materials deliberately, burned their notebooks before going into particularly dangerous situations. Didn't want the enemy to find them if captured. Didn't want their private thoughts read. So the record of what they learned, how they applied it, what worked and what didn't gone. Ashes. And some soldiers survived but never talked about it. Kept their philosophical practices private. Died without telling anyone. Their children found old books and their effects. Worn copies of Epictetus. Marginal notes in languages they couldn't read anymore. Evidence of an inner life no one had known about. Questions that could never be answered. Let me tell you one more secret. One more detail that doesn't usually appear in the histories. Some soldiers wrote their own Stoic texts. Not commentaries on ancient authors, but original philosophy, applying Stoic principles to their specific situations, working out how these ideas functioned in conditions the ancients never imagined. These were rough, unsophisticated by academic standards, but profound in their own way. Real philosophy, real thinking, real attempts to understand and articulate truth. Most of these texts were never published, never meant to be. They were personal, private, but some survived. In archives, in attics, in boxes of old letters. One I read, a sergeant's notebook from Italy, 1944, contains this passage. Epictetus says separate what you control from what you don't. Makes sense, but he never had to lead men into battle. Never had to make decisions that would kill some people to save others. How do you apply his teaching to that? I control my decision. Don't control the outcome. But my decision directly causes the outcome. Where's the separation? He's wrestling with it, working it through. And then, maybe this. I control whether I make the best decision I can with the information I have. Don't control whether it's the right decision. Can't know that until after. Can only do my best. Accept the rest. That's the separation. That's what's in my power. This is philosophy, real philosophy, thought through lived experience. Not as elegant as Marcus Aurelius, but just as true. Maybe more true, because it's tested against harder reality. These are the details, the secrets, the hidden dimensions of how Stoic philosophy functioned in World War II. Not the inspiring public story, but the messy private reality. It helped sometimes, failed sometimes, was misused, was adapted, was transmitted person to person through informal networks, created community, created competition, saved some soldiers' sanity, couldn't save others. It was human, fully, complicatedly human, which means it was imperfect, contradictory, sometimes beautiful, sometimes problematic, always real. And these details matter. They show that philosophy isn't magic, isn't a perfect solution, but it can be useful, can provide tools, can help people cope with impossibly difficult circumstances. The soldiers who lived this, who experimented with ancient wisdom in modern foxholes, who succeeded and failed and tried again, they deserve to be remembered fully, not just as philosophical success stories, but as real people struggling to survive. Sleep now, knowing that truth is always more complicated than inspiration, that real life is messy, that even the best tools are imperfect, and that trying, even when imperfect, is enough. Tomorrow we'll talk about how this changed the world. Tonight, just rest with these strange details, these hidden stories, these secrets soldiers carried, the wisdom that came home, influence and legacy, how war changed philosophy and philosophy changed peace. So the war ended. The soldiers came home. They brought their worn books with them, their notebooks, their practices, their hard-won understanding of how ancient philosophy functioned in modern extremity. And what happened next is stranger and more important than you might expect. Tonight, as you settle into these final quiet hours, let me tell you how World War II changed Stoicism, how it moved from being an academic curiosity to a living practice. How soldiers who'd used philosophy to survive warfare brought it home and used it to survive peace. And how, quietly, gradually, this changed not just philosophy, but the entire culture around mental health, resilience, and human potential. This is a story about legacy, about how crisis creates wisdom, about how wisdom travels, about how suffering, if examined carefully, can become something useful, something that helps others avoid or endure their own suffering. Let's start with something unexpected. Therapy. When World War II veterans came home, many struggled. What we now call PTSD was then called combat fatigue, or battle neurosis, or just nerves. The symptoms were the same: nightmares, hypervigilance, emotional numbness, sudden rage, inability to readjust to civilian life. The Veterans Administration was overwhelmed. Hundreds of thousands of veterans needed help. Traditional therapy approaches weren't sufficient. Psychoanalysis, talking about childhood, exploring unconscious conflicts, didn't address the immediate practical problems. Veterans didn't need to understand why they had nightmares. They needed to stop having them, or at least function despite them. Some VA psychologists, working with philosophical veterans, noticed something interesting. The veterans who'd practiced Stoicism during the war seemed to cope better afterward. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but better. They had frameworks for managing intrusive thoughts, techniques for creating distance from traumatic memories, ways of maintaining function despite ongoing distress. These psychologists started incorporating Stoic ideas into their treatment protocols, not calling it Stoicism. That would have been too academic, too strange, but teaching the same principles. Separate what you can control from what you can't. Your thoughts are just thoughts, not facts. You can't change what happened, but you can change your relationship to what happened. This was revolutionary. This was essentially cognitive therapy before cognitive therapy officially existed. And it came from watching veterans use ancient philosophy to cope with modern trauma. Let me tell you about a psychologist named Albert Ellis. He served in the Army Air Forces during the war. Didn't see combat. He was stationed stateside. But he worked with veterans afterward. Saw their struggles. Saw what helped and what didn't. In the 1950s, he developed something called Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, REBT. The core idea was profoundly Stoic. Your emotional response to events is determined not by the events themselves, but by your beliefs about the events. Change your beliefs, change your emotions. Ellis explicitly acknowledged Stoic influence. He cited Epictetus directly. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. This became foundational to his therapy. He taught clients to identify irrational beliefs. This must not happen. I must be perfect. Everyone must like me. And replace them with rational ones. Was this purely because Ellis had studied Stoicism? Probably not entirely. But the Stoic framework was there. And it was there partly because World War II had made Stoicism practical, had demonstrated its usefulness, had created a generation of men who could testify that these ancient ideas actually worked under pressure. Aaron Beck, developing cognitive therapy around the same time, was influenced by similar observations. Veterans using Stoic techniques. The recognition that thought patterns could be changed, that you weren't helpless victim of your emotions. That cognitive restructuring was possible. Modern cognitive behavioral therapy, now one of the most effective treatments for anxiety and depression, has roots in many places. But one of those roots is World War II soldiers reading Epictetus in foxholes. Let me tell you about the business world, because this is where the legacy gets really unexpected. In the 1960s and 70s, as World War II veterans moved into leadership positions, they brought Stoic ideas with them. Not explicitly, usually. They didn't hold philosophy seminars at their companies, but their leadership style reflected Stoic principles. Focus on what you can control, accept what you can't, maintain character under pressure, take responsibility for your decisions, support your team, do the right thing regardless of outcome. Management training programs started incorporating these ideas. Again, not calling them Stoic, but teaching the same concepts. Distinguish between what's in your control and what isn't. Manage your response, not external events. Focus on process, not just results. Peter Drucker, the management theorist, had served in the British Army during the war. His writings about management emphasized purpose, responsibility, and ethical leadership. His concept of management by objectives: focus on what you're trying to achieve, measure your progress, accept that you can't control all variables. This has Stoic fingerprints. Tom Watson, who transformed IBM into a technological giant, was a Naval Reserve officer during the war. His leadership philosophy emphasized individual responsibility, rational decision-making, and resilience in the face of setbacks. Think was IBM's motto. Very Stoic, really. Think carefully, decide rationally, act with conviction, accept outcomes. These weren't men who walked around quoting Marcus Aurelius at board meetings, but they'd internalized principles during the war, had seen how Stoic frameworks helped under pressure, and they applied those lessons to business challenges. Let me tell you about sports, because this is another unexpected arena of influence. In the 1970s and 80s, sports psychology emerged as a field. Coaches and psychologists working together to help athletes perform under pressure. And what did they teach? Mental discipline. Focus on what you control, your effort, your preparation, not what you don't, the opponent, the crowd, the weather. Stay present. Don't get caught up in past mistakes or future worries. Maintain emotional equilibrium. Accept losses. Learn from failure. This is Stoicism, applied to athletics rather than warfare, but the same basic principles. And some of the early sports psychologists were veterans or were influenced by veterans. They'd seen these techniques work in combat. They adapted them for competition. Bill Walsh, legendary football coach, was influenced by military training principles. His concept of the standard of performance: focus on executing your role excellently regardless of the scoreboard, is profoundly Stoic. You control your performance, not the outcome. So perfect your performance. Accept whatever results. Phil Jackson, basketball coach, explicitly incorporated Stoic and Buddhist philosophy into his coaching. He talked to players about being present, about accepting the moment, about not being controlled by fear of failure. Some of this came from his own study, but some of it came from the cultural current created by World War II. The sense that ancient philosophy had practical applications. The entire field of sports psychology, focused on mental toughness and performance under pressure, owes something to soldiers who learned these skills in war and brought them home to peaceful applications. Let me tell you about education, because this is where the influence became most direct. Many World War II veterans became teachers, used the GI Bill to get degrees, went into schools and universities, and they brought different attitudes toward education. Before the war, philosophy was academic, abstract, theoretical, for intellectual discussion, not practical application. But veteran teachers had used philosophy practically, had seen it work, had survived because of it. They taught differently. They taught philosophy as a toolkit. as something you use, not just study. They emphasized application. How does this idea help you live better? How does it apply to real problems? This practical emphasis changed how philosophy was taught in many schools. Some veterans became vocational counselors, high school guidance counselors, student advisors, and they taught young people Stoic principles without necessarily naming them. Focus on what you can control in your college applications. Do your best. Accept the results. You can't control whether you get the job. You can control how well you prepare and how you present yourself. This practical wisdom, focus on what you control, accept what you don't, maintain character regardless of outcomes, became part of standard guidance counseling, became part of how adults taught young people to handle disappointment and challenge. And it came partly from veterans who'd learned these lessons in extremity. Let me tell you about the counterculture, because even here, surprisingly, there's influence. In the 1960s, young people were rejecting what they saw as their parents' conformity and militarism, rejecting the war in Vietnam, rejecting traditional values. But some of them were drawn to Eastern philosophy, to Buddhism, to meditation, to ideas about non-attachment and acceptance and being present. They were seeking alternatives to Western materialism and competitiveness. And where did many of them encounter these ideas first? Through books, through teachings, through practices that had been shaped, partly, by World War II veterans who'd combined Western Stoicism with exposure to Eastern thought. James Stockdale, that admiral we keep mentioning, spent 7 years in a Vietnamese prison camp in the 60s. His story became public after his release in 1973. He talked about how Stoic philosophy had saved him, how Epictetus had given him tools to survive torture and isolation. This resonated with young people. Here was someone who'd endured real suffering, suffering caused by the war they opposed, and he'd survived through philosophy, through inner discipline and mental techniques that looked a lot like what they were exploring in Buddhism and meditation. Some bridges were built. Some veterans who practiced Stoicism found common ground with young people practicing meditation. They recognized similar principles, similar techniques, similar goals, mental clarity, emotional regulation, resilience, acceptance of what must be accepted. This wasn't universal. Most World War II veterans and most 60s counterculture activists remained far apart. But at the margins, there was dialogue. Recognition of shared wisdom even across political divides. Let me tell you about addiction recovery, because this is one of the most important legacies. Alcoholics Anonymous was founded in 1935, before World War II, but it grew explosively after the war. Why? Partly because many veterans struggled with alcohol, used it to cope with trauma, to numb memories, to sleep despite nightmares. And AA's principles? Remarkably Stoic. The serenity prayer we mentioned earlier. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. That's the Stoic dichotomy of control in prayer form. The 12 steps emphasize taking responsibility for what you can control, your actions, your amends, your daily choices, while accepting what you can't control, your past, your initial addiction, your powerlessness over alcohol. This is Stoic framework applied to recovery. Many World War II veterans found their way to AA, found that the principles that had helped them survive were also helped them survive alcoholism. and they brought explicit philosophical understanding to the program, explained the cognitive basis for the steps, connected AA wisdom with ancient philosophy. This enriched the program, made it deeper, more sophisticated, helped it expand beyond alcoholism to other addictions, to other compulsive behaviors. The 12-step model, now used globally for countless recovery programs, carries Stoic philosophy in its DNA. And that DNA was strengthened by World War II veterans who recognized the connection. Let me tell you about military training itself, because the war changed how soldiers were prepared for combat. Before World War II, training was mostly physical and tactical. After World War II, psychological preparation became standard. The military had learned something important. Mental resilience mattered as much as physical strength. Soldiers needed tools for managing fear, for maintaining decision-making under stress, for coping with trauma. So training expanded. SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, escape, incorporated psychological components. Soldiers were taught mental techniques, how to maintain identity under interrogation, how to resist psychological manipulation, how to endure isolation. These techniques were Stoic, though the military didn't usually call them that. James Stockdale, after his release and recovery, helped develop training protocols. He explicitly incorporated Stoic philosophy into curricula for pilots and special forces, taught them what he'd learned the hard way, how to maintain inner freedom when external freedom was lost, how to separate identity from circumstance, how to endure without breaking. This became standard. Every branch of the military now includes resilience training, teaches cognitive techniques, emphasizes mental preparation alongside physical. And much of this traces back to World War II veterans who insisted that philosophy was essential equipment, not optional enrichment. Other countries adopted similar approaches. NATO allies, eventually even former enemies. The recognition that psychological preparation mattered became universal, and the specific techniques, many derived from Stoicism, spread globally through military training exchanges. Let me tell you about popular culture, because by the 1980s and 90s, Stoic ideas had permeated mainstream American culture, often unrecognized, often called by other names, but present. Self-help books emphasizing mental toughness and emotional intelligence. These were Stoicism for popular audiences. Books about not sweating the small stuff and choosing your attitude. Stoic principles in accessible language. The whole genre of peak performance and personal development drew heavily on ideas that had proven useful in warfare. Movies portrayed soldiers and athletes using mental techniques to overcome fear and achieve excellence. Often these scenes showed practices developed by World War II veterans. Visualization, cognitive reframing, separating controllables from uncontrollables. The techniques became cultural tropes. Corporate training seminars taught stress management and resilience. Workshops that taught Stoic principles without mentioning ancient philosophy. Focus on what you control. Accept what you don't. Reframe challenges as opportunities. Maintain perspective. By the 21st century, Stoicism itself became fashionable. Books explicitly about ancient philosophy became bestsellers. Podcasts discussed Marcus Aurelius. Social media accounts shared Epictetus quotes. Stoicism became trendy. But this modern popularity has roots. It didn't come from nowhere. It came partly from World War II, from soldiers who demonstrated that these ideas worked under the worst possible conditions, who brought them home and applied them to business, sports, education, therapy, who quietly, gradually, made Stoic principles part of mainstream culture. Let me tell you about trauma research, because this is where academic psychology finally caught up with what veterans had known for decades. In the 1990s and 2000s, researchers studying PTSD and resilience made discoveries that sounded remarkably like Stoic philosophy. They found that cognitive reframing helped trauma survivors, that distinguishing what you could control from what you couldn't reduced anxiety, that acceptance-based approaches were effective, that meaning-making was crucial for recovery, that daily practices built resilience. Every one of these findings had been practiced by World War II veterans 50 years earlier. The formal research confirmed what informal experimentation had already shown. Philosophy journals started publishing articles about the Stoic origins of cognitive therapy. Psychology textbooks included sections on ancient philosophical influences. This legitimized something veterans had known, but couldn't always articulate in acceptable professional language. Their practical wisdom became scientific finding. Their lived experience became published research. And this feedback loop strengthened both the science and the practice. Veterans from later wars, Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, benefited from this research, had access to more sophisticated applications of techniques their predecessors had pioneered. The evolution of combat psychology owes enormous debt to World War II soldiers who experimented with ancient philosophy in foxholes. Let me tell you about something called post-traumatic growth. This concept emerged in the 1990s from research with trauma survivors. The finding: some people don't just recover from trauma. They grow. They develop greater appreciation for life, deeper relationships, stronger character, new possibilities. This isn't universal. Many trauma survivors simply try to get back to baseline. And that's fine. That's recovery. But some go beyond. And researchers wanted to understand how. What they found: people who experienced post-traumatic growth often practiced cognitive techniques that were essentially Stoic. They reframed their trauma as a challenge they'd overcome. They focused on what they'd learned. They saw themselves as stronger for having endured. They found meaning in suffering without pretending suffering was good. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Nietzsche's phrase, which is itself basically Stoic, described their experience. Not that trauma was good, but that having survived trauma and learned from it, they were more capable than before. Many World War II veterans experienced this. Didn't talk about it as post-traumatic growth. That language didn't exist yet. But they recognized it. They'd been through hell, come out changed. And some of those changes were positive. They were more appreciative, more focused on what mattered, less bothered by trivial concerns, stronger in some essential way. And many of them attributed this partly to their philosophical practices during the war, to having frameworks for making meaning from suffering, for finding growth and challenge, for transforming horror into wisdom. Let me tell you about fatherhood, because many World War II veterans became fathers after the war, and they raised children differently than previous generations. More philosophical, more explicit about values and character and how to handle difficulty. They'd seen what mattered under extreme pressure. They'd learned what character meant when tested. And they wanted to pass this on. Not through lectures. Most weren't that articulate about philosophy, but through example, through how they responded to disappointment, how they handled their own fears and frustrations, how they taught their children to cope with setbacks. Control what you can control became standard fatherly advice in many households. Do your best, then let go of the outcome. It's how you respond that matters, not what happens to you. These weren't identified as Stoic teachings, just as practical wisdom, common sense, but they were Stoic principles nonetheless. Some children grew up and consciously pursued philosophy because of their father's example, became professors of classics or philosophy, wrote books about Stoicism, but many more simply internalized the lessons, learned to be resilient, to focus on what mattered, to maintain perspective, to act with integrity. This generational transmission of wisdom, from soldiers who learned it in war to children who learned it at home, this shaped post-war American culture, created a generation that valued mental toughness but also emotional honesty, that believed in personal responsibility but also in accepting limitations, that was both stricter and more understanding than previous generations. Let me tell you about the critique, because not everyone sees this legacy as positive. Some scholars and therapists worry that military applications of Stoicism distorted the philosophy, made it too harsh, too focused on suppression rather than healthy processing. They point out that telling trauma survivors to accept what happened and focus on what you control can sometimes discourage necessary grieving, can make people suppress rather than process, can create the appearance of health while burying pain that will resurface later. They note that many World War II veterans who practiced Stoicism still struggled with alcoholism, with rage, with relationship problems. That philosophy helped them function but didn't heal them. That cognitive techniques without emotional processing created men who could work but couldn't fully connect, who provided for families but remained emotionally distant. There's truth in this. Stoicism can be misused, can become emotional avoidance dressed in philosophical language. The military version, focused on maintaining function under pressure, sometimes emphasized resilience over recovery, coping over healing, getting back to duty over getting genuinely well. The legacy is mixed. The techniques help many people, but they also, sometimes, perpetuated problematic patterns, created a culture where showing emotion was weakness, where asking for help was failure, where you were supposed to just push through, maintain discipline, keep your problems private. Modern therapy tries to balance this, uses Stoic cognitive techniques, but combines them with emotional processing, with relationship repair, with addressing trauma directly rather than just managing symptoms. Let me tell you about resilience training in schools. Because starting in the 2000s, many schools began teaching resilience, teaching children how to cope with difficulty, how to handle stress, how to bounce back from setbacks. These programs draw heavily on cognitive techniques derived from Stoicism. Even when they don't mention philosophy, they teach the same principles. Your thoughts affect your feelings. You can change your thoughts. You control your effort, not the outcome. Setbacks are learning opportunities. This is direct legacy of World War II. From soldiers to therapists to educators, from foxholes to classrooms. The same wisdom, adapted for children, but fundamentally the same. Is this good? Mostly yes. Children who learn these skills cope better with academic pressure, with social challenges, with family difficulties. Research shows measurable benefits. But there are also concerns. Are we teaching children to accept injustice? To cope with systemic problems rather than addressing them? To focus on individual resilience rather than collective action? These are real questions. Important questions. The same questions that apply to Stoicism generally. Is acceptance a tool for surviving bad circumstances or an excuse for not changing them? Is focusing on what you control empowering or limiting? Is mental discipline a path to freedom or to compliance? The answers aren't simple. Probably it's both, depending on context. Stoic techniques help individuals cope, but they shouldn't be used to discourage necessary resistance to injustice. Personal resilience is valuable, but it's not a replacement for social change. World War II soldiers used philosophy to survive circumstances they couldn't change. But many of them also, after the war, worked to change things, to improve mental health care, to support fellow veterans, to build a better society. The philosophy gave them strength to cope and strength to act. Let me tell you about something beautiful, because for all the complexity and critique, something genuinely good came from this legacy. A recognition that ordinary people can use philosophy, that ancient wisdom isn't just for academics, that you don't need special education or talent to benefit from studying how to live well. World War II veterans democratized philosophy, proved it worked for farm boys and factory workers, showed that Marcus Aurelius spoke to mechanics and soldiers as much as to emperors and scholars, made philosophy accessible. This matters more than you might realize. For centuries, philosophy had been elite, for the educated, for people with leisure. But soldiers, many with limited formal education, used it effectively, found it helpful, adapted it to their needs. This opened philosophy to everyone, created a sense that thinking about how to live, about what matters, about how to handle difficulty, this was an optional luxury. This was essential equipment for being human. Everyone needed some version of it. Everyone could benefit from it. The current popularity of Stoicism, the abundance of accessible philosophy books and podcasts and apps. This accessibility has roots in World War II, in the demonstration that philosophy works for regular people facing real problems, that it's not just intellectual exercise, but practical tool. So what's the legacy? What did World War II soldiers' experience with Stoicism give us? They gave us cognitive therapy and resilience training, sports psychology and stress management, better military preparation and addiction recovery tools, a culture more aware of mental health and more equipped to handle it, educational approaches that teach coping skills alongside academic content. They gave us permission to use ancient wisdom for modern problems. Proof that philosophy isn't dead tradition, but living practice. Evidence that humans facing extremity can find tools in the past to navigate the present. They gave us their example. Men who were terrified but functioned anyway, who struggled but kept trying, who weren't perfect philosophers but were human beings doing their best, who found that even imperfect practice helped. That trying mattered even when you didn't fully succeed. And they gave us questions we're still wrestling with, about when acceptance becomes resignation, when resilience becomes suppression, when individual coping becomes excuse for systemic problems. when philosophy helps and when it hinders. These aren't resolved. Won't be resolved tonight or maybe ever. But they're important questions, worth wrestling with. And we only wrestle with them because World War II soldiers forced them into view by their example. The war ended 75 years ago. The soldiers are mostly gone now, but their legacy continues. Continues in therapy offices and boardrooms, in schools and sports fields, in military training and self-help books, in academic journals and popular culture. Philosophy traveled from ancient Rome to World War II foxholes to here, to now, to you lying there tonight, carried by soldiers who never meant to be philosophers, who just wanted to survive, who found that ancient wisdom helped, who brought it home and shared it. Their gift to you, the knowledge that philosophy works, that ancient ideas can address modern challenges, that you have tools for whatever you face, that others have endured and found ways to maintain dignity and humanity. Tomorrow brings its own challenges, but tonight, rest knowing you're connected to this legacy, these soldiers, these philosophers, this long human conversation about how to live well despite difficulty. Sleep now, carrying forward what they learned, what they paid for with their suffering, what they generously passed on. The wisdom came home, and it's yours now. Use it well. Dawn in the barracks. Culture and daily life. Living philosophy in muddy boots. Let's wake up together. Not in your comfortable bed, but in a military barracks in England. It's 1944. Spring. Dawn is breaking slowly through blackout curtains. Around you, 30 other men are waking up. The air smells of wool, sweat, cigarette smoke, and the peculiar metallic scent of fear that never quite goes away. Tonight, in these final quiet moments before sleep, let me walk you through what it actually meant to live as a soldier trying to practice ancient philosophy in the modern world. Not the inspiring moments, not the dramatic applications, just the daily texture of existence, the ordinary hours, the small practices, the way philosophy mixed with coffee and K-rations, and the endless waiting that makes up most of war. Because this is where philosophy really lived. Not in foxholes during combat, though we've talked about that, but in the mundane moments. In the breakfast line and the cleaning rituals and the long afternoons when nothing happened except thinking and waiting and trying not to go crazy from boredom and anticipation. This is how soldiers actually lived with Stoicism. Day by ordinary day, you wake before reveille. This is deliberate. You've trained yourself to wake early, in the quiet before the barracks erupts into activity. This is your philosophy time, your practice. Before you become a soldier performing duties, you're a person trying to maintain your humanity. You sit up quietly. Your bunk is narrow, thin mattress over wire springs. The blanket is scratchy wool. Standard military issue. Everything here is standard issue. Even the men, in a way, all wearing the same clothes, following the same schedule, eating the same food. Individuality expressed in small ways. How you arrange your footlocker, what photos you keep, what books you carry. Your feet touch cold floor. Concrete. Always cold in the morning. You reach for your boots. Never far away. You might need to move quickly, but don't put them on yet. You reach into your footlocker. There, under your extra socks and your letters from home, is your worn copy of Epictetus, the Enchiridion, small enough to fit in your pocket, but you keep it here during the night. Safe. You move to the window. Pull back the blackout curtain just slightly. Enough to see dawn, but not enough to show light that might guide German bombers. Not that they bomb much here anymore, but habits persist. Rules are rules. And you read just a few minutes, just one passage, not trying to absorb everything, just centering yourself, reminding yourself of what matters before the day demands you forget. Today's passage: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. You read it twice. Think about what it means for today. You have patrol duty. This is in your power. Being alert, supporting your squad, doing your job well. The outcome of the patrol, whether you encounter the enemy, whether something goes wrong, that's not in your power. Do your part. Accept the rest. It helps. Slightly. Doesn't eliminate the knot in your stomach. Doesn't make you brave, but gives you something to focus on besides fear. A framework. A way of thinking about the day that makes it manageable. Around you, other men are waking. Some groan. Some curse softly. Some lie there staring at the ceiling, not wanting to start another day. A few others also read. Bibles mostly, some novels. One man always reads the same letter from his girl back home. Everyone has their morning ritual, their way of preparing. You close the book, return it to its safe place. The day is beginning. Time to be a soldier. Reveille sounds. A bugle or a whistle or just a sergeant shouting. Doesn't matter which. The effect is the same. The barracks erupts into controlled chaos. 30 men trying to dress, shave, prepare simultaneously in limited space. You wash at a communal basin. Cold water. Always cold. Soap that doesn't lather well. You've learned to shave quickly. Straight razor. No time for carefulness. Small cuts are common. Nobody complains. You dress in the same uniform you wore yesterday. It never feels truly clean. Smells of you and of everyone who wore it before you. Breakfast is in the mess hall. You stand in line with your metal tray. The servers slop food onto it. Powdered eggs. There's supposed to be eggs, anyway. Toast that's gone cold. Coffee that's mostly water, but at least it's hot. Sometimes oatmeal. Sometimes beans. Sometimes mystery meat that might be spam or might be something else entirely. You don't complain. Food is food. Another Stoic lesson, actually. Epictetus said to be grateful for whatever is provided. To not wish for delicacies when you have bread. You have bread. Well, toast and eggs. Well, powder pretending to be eggs. It fills your stomach. That's enough. You eat with your squad. The same men every day. You know them better than your family now. Know their habits, their smells, their fears, their dreams, their annoying quirks, their hidden kindnesses. There's Williams from Ohio. Dairy farmer before the war. Quiet, reliable, never complains. He reads the Bible every morning. You've had good conversations with him about philosophy and faith. He sees no contradiction. God helps those who help themselves, he says. That's like your Stoics. Do your part. Let God handle the rest. There's Rodriguez from Texas. Loud. Funny. Uses humor to cope with everything. Makes jokes about the food, the officers, the enemy, death. Some of his jokes are funny. Some aren't. But you laugh anyway because you understand what he's doing. He's managing fear through humor. You manage it through philosophy. Same goal, different method. There's Jackson from New York. Intellectual. Was studying law before he enlisted. He's the one who asks hard questions about your Stoicism. But what if what you control isn't enough? What if trying your best still leads to disaster? You don't always have good answers, but you appreciate the questions. They make you think. Make your philosophy sharper, more honest. There's Morrison, the youngest, barely 18, scared all the time though he tries to hide it. You've taken him under your wing, shared your philosophy book with him, talked him through the basics. Focus on what you control. He's trying. Some days it helps him. Some days nothing helps, and he just trembles, and you sit with him until he can function again. These men are your family now, your squad, your community. And philosophy isn't just individual practice. It's shared, discussed, lived together. After breakfast, there are duties. Always duties. The military runs on routine, on repetition, on doing the same things the same way every day until they're automatic. You clean your rifle. This is ritual, sacred almost. Your rifle is your life. You disassemble it, clean each part, oil it, reassemble it, check function. Do this perfectly. This is in your control. This you can do well. The repetition is meditative. Your hands know the movements. Your mind can wander. Some men hate this, find it boring, but you've learned to appreciate it. It's moving meditation, like the monk's walking meditation you read about once. Doing simple physical tasks with complete attention, being fully present with the action. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this, about doing every task, no matter how small, as if it were your last. As if it mattered completely, not because any individual task matters that much, but because how you do anything is how you do everything. Character is built in small moments, in cleaning your rifle, in making your bunk, in being thorough and careful when no one's watching. You make your bunk, military corners, tight, perfect. This too is in your control. This too is practice. Some men are sloppy. Their bunks are okay, but not excellent. You aim for excellent, not to impress officers, for yourself, to maintain standards, to practice discipline. Mid-morning, there's training, drills, marching, practice assaults, physical conditioning. Hours of it, repetitive, exhausting, sometimes pointless seeming. But you found purpose in it. This is preparation. This is doing what you can with what you control. You can't control whether you'll face combat, but you can control whether you're ready. You can control your fitness, your skills, your preparation. During runs, when your lungs burn and your legs ache, you practice the Stoic technique of reframing discomfort. This isn't punishment. This is training. This pain is making you stronger, is increasing your chance of survival, is building character. Change your interpretation, change your experience. Doesn't make running pleasant. You still hate it, but it makes it meaningful. Gives you something to focus on besides discomfort. You're not just suffering. You're forging yourself into someone capable of surviving what's coming. During drills, when sergeants yell and you repeat the same movements for the 100th time, you remember Marcus Aurelius, an emperor who was also a soldier, who drilled with his troops, who did boring, repetitive duty, who found meaning in it anyway. If he could maintain his philosophy while being emperor and general, you can maintain yours while being a private. Some of your squaw mates think you're crazy. Why do you care so much? It's just drill. Just go through the motions. But you've explained, this is practice for when it matters. If you go through motions now, you'll go through motions in combat. But if you're fully present now, fully committed now, you'll be present and committed then. Not everyone gets it. That's okay. You're not trying to convert anyone, just doing what helps you. Lunch is similar to breakfast. Different food, maybe soup, maybe sandwiches, maybe some combination of canned things, but same routine. Same tray, same line, same table with your squad. The conversation turns philosophical sometimes. Not formally, not, let's discuss Epictetus, but practically. Someone mentions fear. Someone else mentions a technique that helped. You share what you've learned. Others share what they know. Williams talks about prayer, how he prays not for safety, but for courage, not for survival, but for the strength to do his duty regardless of outcome. This is deeply Stoic, though he's expressing it religiously. You point this out. He's pleased. So God and the Stoics agree, he says. Good to know. Rodriguez talks about his father, how his father survived poverty and discrimination through humor and resilience. He always said, control what you can, don't worry about what you can't. I thought that was just his way. Didn't know it was philosophy. You lend him your book. He reads it, returns it with notes in the margin. His notes are funny, but also insightful. He gets it in his own way. Jackson argues that Stoicism might be too passive. What about injustice? What about fighting for change? You discuss this. Explain that Stoic acceptance doesn't mean not acting. It means accepting what is while working to change what should change. You control your effort, not the outcome. So fight for justice. Just don't destroy yourself if you don't win immediately. These conversations are precious. They're philosophy lived, not academic, not abstract. Real people working out how to apply ancient wisdom to modern challenges, helping each other understand, supporting each other's practice. Afternoons vary, sometimes more training, sometimes maintenance, fixing equipment, cleaning quarters, organizational work. Sometimes lectures from officers about tactics or safety or current operations. During downtime, and there's a surprising amount of downtime in military life, waiting between activities, you read. Others play cards or write letters or sleep. You read. Sometimes your philosophy books, sometimes novels, sometimes just anything to occupy your mind. Other soldiers notice. Some mock gently. Here's the professor, always reading. You don't mind. It's affectionate mostly. They respect it, even if they don't share it. Some ask questions. What are you reading? Is it good? Does it help? You tell them honestly. Yes, it helps. No, it doesn't fix everything. No, it doesn't make you fearless. But it gives you tools, frameworks, ways of thinking that make things bearable. They nod. Some borrow your books. Some just remember what you said. You've noticed something interesting. The philosophical community is larger than you expected. There are other readers, other thinkers, scattered through the division. You find each other, share books, discuss ideas, create informal study groups. One evening a week, a dozen of you meet in an empty supply room. Someone reads a passage. You discuss it. How does this apply? What does it mean for us? Does it work? When does it fail? It's part therapy group, part study session, part spiritual practice. These meetings are unofficial, not authorized but not prohibited. Officers don't interfere. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they know and approve. Maybe they know and don't care as long as you do your duties. You don't ask. You just meet. Evenings, after dinner, there's a bit of free time before lights out. This is when letters get written, photos get looked at, memories get indulged. You write home, to your mother, to your girl if you have one, to friends. What do you say? You can't describe what you're really experiencing. Censors would cut it. And even if they didn't, how would you explain? How would they understand? So you write about small things: the weather, the food, safe details, and you include philosophical observations. I've been thinking about what Dad used to say: control what you can, let go of what you can't. It helps. Your father never said exactly that, but it's close enough to things he said that your family will understand you're coping. They'll know you're finding ways to manage. You receive letters too. They're lifelines, connections to the world you left, reminders that life continues beyond the war. Your mother writes about the garden. Your girl writes about her job. Friends write about mundane civilian things that seem impossibly distant and precious. Sometimes their problems seem trivial. Someone complaining about gas rationing or difficult neighbors. Part of you wants to scream. You don't know what problems are, but your philosophy intervenes. Their challenges are real to them. Your challenges don't diminish theirs. Suffering isn't a competition. Everyone struggles with what they face. So you write back with empathy, with support. You don't mention that you might die tomorrow. You don't mention the fear. You maintain the fiction that you're fine, that everything will be okay. Because what good would honesty do? They can't help, can only worry. Better to spare them. Nighttime is when the philosophy gets tested most. When you're lying in your bunk, in the dark, listening to other men breathe and snore, and sometimes cry quietly. When your own thoughts are loudest. When fear has space to expand. This is when you practice the evening review. Epictetus taught this. Marcus Aurelius did this. Every night, examine your day. What did you do well? What did you do poorly? What will you do differently tomorrow? You think through the day. During training, you were patient with Morrison when he struggled. Good. During lunch, you snapped at Rodriguez when he made a stupid joke. Not good. He was just coping in his way. Tomorrow, be more understanding. During drill, you maintained focus even when exhausted. Good. During free time, you wasted an hour worrying about things you can't control. Not good. Tomorrow, when worry starts, redirect to something productive. This isn't self-punishment. It's self-examination. It's how you improve, day by day, choice by choice, building character through honest assessment and committed effort. Some nights you pull out your notebook, the waterproof one with your philosophical observations. You write, "Today I learned, patience is harder than courage. Being kind to someone annoying requires more discipline than facing danger. Need to work on this." Or, Marcus Aurelius was right. "Other people's opinions don't define me." Williams thinks I'm too serious. Rodriguez thinks I'm too quiet. Jackson thinks I'm too accepting of injustice. They're all partly right. But I know who I'm trying to be. That's enough. Or simply, scared tonight. Tomorrow's patrol. Practiced premeditatio malorum. Imagined everything that could go wrong. Still scared, but calmer. Ready to do my job. That's all I control. Let me tell you about Sundays. Because even in war, there's something different about Sundays. Chapel services in the morning for those who attend. Some downtime. A sense of pause. You go to services sometimes. Not because you're particularly religious. Your Stoicism is philosophical rather than theological, but because it's community. Because the chaplain is good. Because the rituals are comforting. Because your squad mates go and you're part of the squad. The chaplain knows you're Stoic. He's fine with it. Actually, he's interested. You've had long conversations. He sees parallels between Christianity and Stoicism. Both teach that we're not in control of circumstances, he says. Both teach that character matters more than outcomes. Both teach that we should treat others well. Different frameworks, similar wisdom. He sometimes incorporates Stoic ideas into his sermons. Never explicitly. That might confuse the congregation, but subtly. We can't control what happens to us. We can control how we respond. That's where faith matters. That's where character shows. The Christian soldiers nod. You nod. Everyone finds their meaning. After services, there's usually better food. The military tries to make Sundays special. Sometimes there's real eggs instead of powdered. Sometimes there's meat that's clearly meat. Sometimes there's cake or pie or something sweet. Small luxuries, greatly appreciated. Sunday afternoons are for rest, for games, for letters, for sleep if you can manage it, for wandering around the base, for small freedoms that remind you you're human, not just a soldier. You walk sometimes, just around the perimeter, thinking, practicing your philosophy, looking at the countryside. England is green even when you're nervous about dying. There's something grounding about physical movement, about being in your body, about remembering there's a world beyond the military. Let me tell you about friendships, because soldiers form bonds that civilians can't quite understand. You live together constantly, share everything, depend on each other absolutely, know each other's fears and hopes and secrets. Your best friend here is Jackson, the law student from New York. You're different people. He's urban and sophisticated. You're more simple and direct, but you connect philosophically. You challenge each other, make each other think harder. Late at night, after everyone else is asleep, you sometimes whisper conversations about philosophy, about fear, about what you're trying to become, about whether any of this matters. Do you really believe this stuff? Jackson asks one night. The Stoicism. Do you believe it, or are you just using it to cope? You think before answering. Both, you finally say. I believe it's true, and I'm using it to cope. Those aren't contradictory. If it's true, it should help with coping. If it helps with coping, that's evidence it's true. But what if it's just comforting fiction? Just a story we tell ourselves to make unbearable things bearable? Would that make it less valuable? If a fiction helps me face death with dignity, helps me support my squad, helps me maintain my humanity, isn't that a useful fiction? He's quiet for a moment. Then, I guess. But it matters to me whether it's true. Not just useful. True. Then test it, you say? Practice it. See if it works. See if it changes you for the better. If it does, maybe that's what truth means. Not abstract correctness, but lived effectiveness. These conversations sustain you. Remind you that you're thinking beings. That even in war, even facing death, the examined life matters. Philosophy isn't escape from reality. It's engagement with reality at its deepest level. Let me tell you about fear, because we've talked around it, but not directly at it. And fear is the constant companion, the thing you wake with and sleep with and carry all day. You're afraid of dying. Of course, everyone is. But more than that, you're afraid of dying badly, of panicking, of letting your squad down, of discovering you're a coward, of not living up to your own standards when tested. The Stoic philosophy helps with this, not by eliminating fear. That's impossible, but by giving you something to do with it. You examine the fear. Notice it. Name it. I'm afraid of dying. I'm afraid of pain. I'm afraid of failure. Just naming it reduces its power slightly. Then you apply the dichotomy of control. Dying is not in my control. Pain might not be in my control, but my response to fear is in my control. My effort to do my duty despite fear is in my control. My choice to support my squad is in my control. This doesn't make you brave, but it makes you functional. You can be afraid and still act. Can feel terror and still do your job. Can acknowledge fear without being controlled by it. Some nights the fear is overwhelming. You lie in your bunk and your heart races and you can't breathe properly and you think you might break. On those nights, you get up, go outside, walk, practice your breathing, repeat your phrases. This is not in my control. My response is in my control. Sometimes Williams finds you, sits with you, doesn't say much, just sits. His faith sustains him. Your philosophy sustains you, but companionship sustains you both. You're not alone. That matters more than any technique. Let me tell you about small rituals, because soldiers create rituals, superstitions, habits, ways of asserting control over uncontrollable situations. Some men always put on their left boot first. Some always eat in the same order. Some touch their lucky coin. Some pray specific prayers. Everyone has something. Your ritual is philosophical, but also physical. Before any dangerous operation, patrol, assault, whatever, you do the same sequence. First, you check your equipment 3 times. Rifle, ammunition, helmet, pack. Everything in place. This is practical but also ritualistic. This is in your control. Second, you take out your Stoic coin, the challenge coin you designated, and hold it. Feel both sides. Remember what each represents. Control and non-control. Your part and the universe's part. This is symbolic but helpful. Third, you do the premeditatio malorum. Imagine everything that could go wrong. Make friends with worst-case scenarios. So if they happen, you're not surprised. You're prepared. Fourth, you connect with your squad. Make eye contact with each man. Nod. Acknowledge. We're in this together. I've got your back. You've got mine. This isn't philosophy. This is love, really. Brotherhood. But it's also Stoic. Recognizing that humans need each other, that we're social beings, that duty to others is part of virtue. Fifth and finally, you take 3 slow breaths. Center yourself. Remind yourself, do my part. Accept the outcome. Maintain character. Then you're ready. Not unafraid, but ready. Let me tell you about the moments between. Because war is mostly waiting. Most of your time isn't combat. It's anticipation, preparation, boredom, the grinding psychological wear of knowing something terrible might happen, but not knowing when. These are the hardest times in some ways. During combat, you're too busy to think. Fear gets overridden by adrenaline and training. But during waiting, fear has space to expand, to colonize your thoughts, to become overwhelming. This is when philosophical practice matters most. When you need techniques for managing your own mind, for occupying yourself productively, for staying functional during the tedium and tension. You read, write, talk with your squad, play cards sometimes, though you're not good at it. Walk, think, practice your cognitive techniques. Watch others and learn from them. Rodriguez stays funny. Uses humor as weapon against fear. You admire this. Sometimes join in. Learn to laugh even when nothing's funny. Learn that laughter is defiance. is insistence on humanity despite circumstances. Williams prays, constantly, not ostentatiously, but quietly, his lips moving slightly. You watch this. Recognize it as his version of your philosophical practice. Different content, but same function. Maintaining center, finding meaning, connecting to something larger. Jackson thinks, talks, argues, needs intellectual engagement to stay sane. You provide this. Debate philosophy and politics and life and meaning. Sometimes you're annoyed. You want quiet, but you do it anyway. Because he needs it. Because that's what friends do. Morrison struggles. He doesn't have your philosophy or Williams's faith or Rodriguez's humor or Jackson's intellect. He just has fear. You spend time with him. Teach him what you can. Sit with him when teaching isn't enough. Try to be for him what others are for you. A presence that says you're not alone. Let me tell you about what you believe. Because after all this philosophy, all this practice, what do you actually believe? You believe that humans have dignity, that we can choose our responses even when we can't choose our circumstances. That character matters more than outcomes. That doing right is its own reward. That we're all connected. That duty and love and courage are real and valuable. That life is worth living well even if, especially if, it might end tomorrow. You believe that Stoic philosophy is useful, not perfect, not complete, but useful. It gives you tools, frameworks, ways of thinking that help you function, help you maintain your humanity, help you support others. You're not sure if you believe the metaphysical parts, the logos, the cosmic reason ordering everything. You're agnostic about that. But the practical parts, the ethics, the psychology, the techniques, those you believe because you've tested them. They work. You believe that other approaches work too. That Williams's faith and Rodriguez's humor and Jackson's intellect are equally valid. That there are many ways to maintain humanity under pressure. That philosophy is one path among several. That what matters is finding what works for you and using it. You believe that your squad mates are good people. That they're brave without being fearless. That they're doing their best, that they deserve to survive, that if you don't all survive, those who do will remember those who don't, that this matters somehow. You believe that you're afraid, that this is okay, that courage isn't absence of fear but action despite it, that every day you function despite fear is a victory, a small one, but real. Let me tell you about hope. Because underneath everything else, there's hope. Has to be hope. Otherwise, why bother? Why practice philosophy? Why maintain discipline? Why try to be good? You hope you'll survive, that you'll go home, that you'll see your family again, that you'll build a life, that this won't last forever, that peace will come. You hope your squad will survive, that Williams will return to his farm, that Rodriguez will go to college on the GI Bill like he plans. That Jackson will become a lawyer. That Morrison will grow up and find happiness. You hope this war matters. That you're fighting for something real. That the evil you're opposing is truly evil and worth opposing. That victory will make the world better. That the suffering will have meaning. You hope philosophy is real. That virtue matters. That character counts. That how you live matters regardless of how long you live. That dying well, with courage and dignity, is possible and valuable. You don't voice these hopes much. They're private, personal, tender, too vulnerable to expose. But they're there, underneath the fear and the discipline and the daily routine. Hope persists, quietly, stubbornly. Marcus Aurelius wrote about hope and fear being the same thing, both involving mental time travel away from the present moment. But he also wrote about duty and purpose and the importance of serving the common good. That's hope, really. Belief that service matters, that effort matters, that we can make things better. Your hope is philosophical, is practical, is grounded in your squad and your duty and your commitment to living well however long you live. It's not naive optimism. It's something harder and more real. It's decided hope, chosen hope, hope maintained through discipline and practice and daily choice. And so the day ends as it began. Lights out, darkness, 30 men in bunks, some sleeping quickly, some lying awake, some snoring, some crying quietly, some praying, some remembering, some trying not to think at all. You lie there, tired, still afraid, still uncertain about tomorrow, but you've done what you can, performed your duties, practiced your philosophy, supported your squad, maintained your character. That's all you control. That's enough. You think about Marcus Aurelius, about how he did this every night, reviewed his day, reminded himself of principles, prepared himself for tomorrow, emperor and soldier and philosopher, doing what you're doing, struggling as you struggle, 2,000 years ago and right now, connected across time by shared practice. You think about tomorrow. It will be like today, duties and drills and waiting and fear, more practicing, more trying, more failing and trying again. Same routine, but you can do it. You've done it before. You'll do it again, one day at a time. You reach for your notebook. Write one last note. Today was okay. Did my best. Tomorrow will be okay too. Just do my best again. That's the practice. That's enough. You close the notebook. Close your eyes. Around you, your squad sleeps. Your friends, your brothers. Together you've survived today. Together you'll face tomorrow. That's what matters. Not philosophy alone. Philosophy in community. Wisdom lived with others. Courage shared. Sleep comes eventually. Not easily, but eventually. And tomorrow comes. Always tomorrow. Always the practice. Always the trying. This is what it meant to be a soldier studying Stoicism. Not dramatic moments of philosophical insight. Just daily practice. Daily effort. Daily choosing to try to be good despite being afraid. The ancient wisdom. The modern war. The ordinary men. The daily struggle. All mixed together in the lived experience of trying to maintain humanity in inhuman circumstances. And that, finally, is the real story. Not the inspiration, not the legacy, but the daily lived reality. The texture of actual life. The small moments that made up the whole. Rest now, knowing that others have faced their days with courage and fear mixed together. That trying matters. That daily practice matters. That you're connected to this long tradition of people doing their best. The soldiers sleep. Their books beside them. Their practices sustaining them. Their hope persisting. And so can you. Sleep now. Tomorrow brings its own challenges. Tonight, just rest.